Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of the Mythgard Movie Club. So happy to have all of you with us. Hello, GoToWebinar and Twitch folks that are joining us tonight. We're here to talk about She, the 1935 production of the writer Haggard novel. So let's go around, I guess, and introduce ourselves first as the panelists. I'm Kat Sass. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Mythgard Movie Club. And also the academic coordinator for the Signum MA program, of which I'm also an alum. And I am an academic coordinator by day also. And I blog at, Corey laughs every time I say that. This is how I spend my days and my nights.
Coordinator by day and by night.
By night. Yeah, and it's very exciting double life that I lead.
That's right.
Very similar days and nights. And I blog at ravingsanity.wordpress.com. And with Curtis Wyant, we also do a podcast called Cat and Kurt's TV Review, where we talk about science fiction and fantasy TV shows. So Chris, why don't you go ahead next?
All right, I'm Chris Swank. I'm also an alum from Signum University, one of the old alums way back to 2011. I'm now a preceptor at Signum and a thesis advisor, and by day I'm a librarian. That's my secret identity.
Yeah, and I'm Curtis Wyant. As Kat said, we do a podcast together and co-host the Mythgard Movie Club here. I help out Signum with some of the website work and some of the social media. You may not know it, but some of those tweets and Facebook posts are mine. So blame me, not Corey. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to talking about She, which is a movie that hadn't really looked into at all before we chose it for this.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm Corey Olson, president of Signum University, and really happy to be here. Excited to, I've been watching a lot of old black and white things lately, so it was fun to go back and watch She. And also, I will say, She is a, the novel by H. Rider Haggard was like the Haggard I've been meaning to get around to for a really, really long time. I hadn't ever read it before. I'd read King Solomon's Mines and a couple others, but I'd never read She before. So the opportunity to talk about this movie both gave me the excuse to go back and read She, the novel, and to watch the film. And so I'm very interested to talk about both.
So you didn't take Doug Anderson's class then, because I believe you read it in that.
That's right, you did. Yes. No, I did some highlights from that class, but I did not do all the reading. Exactly. Yeah, cool. So of course, it is, as most of you know, we are coming to the tail end of the Signum University fundraising campaign this year. We are in the antepenultimate day, in fact, of our main fundraising campaign. And it has been really wonderful so far. As you can see, we're actually a little over now, $48,000 so far earned. That's really spectacular. We are well over 3/4 of the way to our budgetary needs for the year, which, as you can see in the little graphic down there, is at 60,000. And we do have additional needs this year for finishing our credentialing process. The process of applying for accreditation is expensive, and I'm going to be explaining all that stuff pretty soon, showing you charts and tables and things of all that stuff, which reminds me, of course, as you can see here on the bottom right of your screen, that our annual webathon is on Saturday, October 13th at noon. So that's 2 days from now. And the webathon, this is our 6th annual webathon, and it's always a tremendous lot of fun. We have lots and lots. We sort of feature snippets and bits of all of our different stuff that we do. And it's a great deal of fun. So the stuff that is going to be happening in the webathon this year will include things like I'm going to have a discussion with Serena Higgins, about, she, of course, published her wonderful book, The Inklings and King Arthur. Earlier it won the Mythopoeic Award this year for scholarship, which was absolutely fantastic and super well deserved. And she and I are going to be talking about specifically Sir Thomas Malory and the Inklings. Of course, we've been thinking a lot about Malory in the Mythgard Academy lately. And so we're going to be looking at the relationship that all the Inklings had with Sir Thomas Malory. Specifically, actually kind of maintaining the Arthurian theme in a later segment in the webathon. I'm going to be doing a close reading of The Fall of Arthur. I've never really done a concerted broadcast on The Fall of Arthur, and I've been thinking about it, especially thanks to the section of Malory that we just finished a couple weeks back. So I decided I want to sit down with The Fall of Arthur. So we're going to do that. Kat, who's above me on the screen here, is going to join me. We're going to talk about classic Doctor Who. Kat is our resident Doctor Who expert here among our Signum folks. And it's been my project lately. I'm working my way towards the end of season 7. I'm in the 3rd Doctor now. And I am just really, really interested to see how the kind of mythology of Doctor Who grew from the beginning. It is, after 7 seasons, I can say nothing like I would have predicted. Knowing the new Who as I did, I've watched through all the new Who twice now, but I'd never seen any of the classic before, so I went back to do that and was super surprised by what I found when I went back and started at season 1. So Kat and I are going to talk about that some on Saturday, and that'll be fun. We're doing trivia competitions. I'm going to do a Lotro stream. Wigand is going to do Pelargir. I'm going to do the epic battle at Pelargir alongside Aragorn and the Army of the Dead. So that's going to be fun. I'm going to do, we're going to do, let's see what else we're going to do. There's another thing. Oh yeah, of course, the State of the University address, where I'm going to be explaining what's going on. Lots of people have been asking questions about where we are in our credentialing process and what's happening. So I'm going to explain all that stuff and what we're looking towards this coming year. And also, we're going to be doing some new and exciting things with Mythgard. Mythgard is expanding and developing this year. So I am going to host a special session at the very beginning, actually. This is going to start right at noon with our new director of the Mythgard Institute, which I am super excited to introduce to you and to talk about what's some of the things that are coming over the course of this coming year. And there will be trivia contests and prizes and giveaways and the drawings for our donor drawings from all of our different classes. And I'm going to be giving stuff away like Father Christmas all day long. So it's going to be great fun. So I hope you'll be able to join me. That starts at noon and ends sometime much later than that, midnight-ish, basically. Yeah. So hope you'll be able to join me for that. And there's the link to that is on the fund page, right, Curtis? The GoToWebinar link. So signumuniversity.org/fund. You can find the registration link to join that, or you can join us on Twitch. We'll be broadcasting that on Twitch all day long too.
And if you don't want to go to the fun page, it's actually right on our homepage too. Just scroll down a little. It's right under the video there. So lots of places you can get that link to. So you mentioned drawings. Do you want to real quick mention what we're doing tonight too? Yeah,
so we're going to do a couple drawings here tonight too. So we're going to do this just like I've been doing in my other regular broadcast sessions during the course of the last 3 weeks. So we're going to do, when we come to the end of our session, we'll do 2 drawings. So I'll do 1 drawing from among everybody who is in attendance. But first I'm going to do a drawing from among everybody who makes a donation during the session here tonight. So while the session is going, if you make a donation while the session is going on, just go to signumuniversity.org/donate, as you can see in the top right-hand corner of your screen there. Make a donation tonight, and we'll do a drawing there. And the prizes for these 2 drawings are, you can choose either a book. There are 5 books that we are giving away with a custom signed book plate in it that I've written up. And the books are my Hobbit book, and there's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer/Philosopher's Stone. There is Unfinished Tales by Tolkien. There is Sauron Defeated by Tolkien, which is, of course, the next book that we're doing in the Mythgard Academy after we finish Malory sometime not exceptionally soon, but before too long. And then Dune by Frank Herbert. So those are the five, one of those 5 books you can choose with the custom book plate. So we'll send it to you in the book plate, or you can choose 2 free tickets to the regional moot of your choice. So in either case, if you win a drawing, all you have to do is send an email to donate@signumu.org and tell us that you won, and we'll help you acquire your winnings. It was actually really cool. I get one of the person who won one of the drawings the week before last came to Middlemoot, so I actually hand delivered his free book to him.
Nice.
He chose a copy of my book, and I'm like, wait, I've got one. So I brought it. I'm like, hey, congratulations, you won. I've never like hand delivered a drawing prize before. That was kind of fun.
Arthur's saying he likes his odds, although we should note that unlike other movie clubs, we're actually streaming this on Twitch as well, and so there may be
a little more competition than usual. Yes, it's true.
Than normal, but yeah. Anyway, well, great. So that's all the fundraising stuff. But wait, there's more. Of course, we've got. Speaking of regional moots, we've got 3 of them coming up. 2 of them in fairly short order. In a couple of weeks here, we've got the LA moot, which is looking pretty good. Good little Southern California contingent there, and I understand there's going to be some planning for even more activities, perhaps in the future, going on at that moot.
That's right.
Then just a couple weeks after that, we've got Magnolia Moot down in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a great little city. Used to have to go down there for work back when I was working for a bank headquartered in that city. Great little place. Our friends at Johnson C. Smith University, which Corey never passes up a chance to get down there.
That's right.
I know.
That's right. It's my home away from home down there.
So looking at that. And then Tex Moot. Everything is bigger in Texas, including the amount of time that they start promoting their moots.
Yes.
Because I think perhaps other than Myth Moot, which is our big annual international moot, I think they are ahead of the crowd when it comes to getting out in front of the calls for papers and everything. Registration is open. For all 3 of these, registration is still open, and actually Magnolia Moot just today extended their CFP. So if you were thinking of going and wanted to present something there, go ahead and send that in. Details, again, you can access it right from the Signum homepage. Scroll down a little bit. It's a little further down than normal because we have our annual fun stuff there, but all of the event stuff is right on the homepage. Also coming up, Kat, you mentioned that you're an academic coordinator, and nothing is truer than when one semester ends and literally like the next day she has all of the information up for the upcoming semester. She's I know that hasn't been an easy process. That hasn't always been the case in previous years, and it's been hard wrangling. Maybe I won't call out any specific people, but maybe there are certain members of staff or faculty who Kat has to lasso into shape. But we've got some really exciting classes coming up. A new one on the life and times of the English epic, which just that title is just cool enough to like sign up.
It is, yeah.
Be looking at some of not just English epics, but some of the precursors to some of the classical stuff like the Aeneid, Dante's Inferno, and that kind of thing. But the other thing, so of course we're looking at Milton and the Fairy Queen and that sort of thing. But I like too that they're coming right up to modern day with looking at Philip Pullman, The Subtle Knife, and even the movie Hot Fuzz, which is not one that we're going to be doing on Movie Club anytime soon. So that's the only place you can get it. That in-depth analysis that Signum provides. So lots of really cool stuff. I encourage you to go out and look at that. And then, of course, some of our flex courses, Tolkien's World of Middle-earth, which is Verlin Flieger's class about the Legendarium, Literary Copernicus about Lovecraft's works, which you can see my Lovecraft right about there, the book that I had for that. What better time to sign up for a Lovecraft class than a spooky time in October here, right? So go ahead.
That's right.
Yeah, and Sharon reminds us to remind everybody else, if you're interested in registering for classes, do so early. You get the sort of pick of discussion times. You know, the early registrants are the ones who influence the best kind of days and times. So the sooner the better.
Yeah, yeah. Norse myths and sagas, which are in translation, right? That's not one where you have to have.
That's the one in translation, correct.
You don't have to know Old Norse yet for that
right.
one, although it might make you want to learn Old Norse.
And speaking of wanting to learn Old Norse, actually, I forgot. We're doing a webathon segment on Old Norse. So we're going to have Paul Peterson, one of our Old Norse professors, who's going to come and who's going to do a little like intro translation seminar. So we're going to read some Norse Eddas and see how it is in the Old Norse and how we work our way through that. So we're going to do a webinar session, a webathon session on that, I should say. Yeah.
Very cool. And then Intro to Anglo-Saxon, which you know is the language course that we're offering.
Yeah, classic.
And so, if you don't know already, our current Academy book, like Corey I think just mentioned a few minutes ago, is Le Morte d'Arthur. We won't spend a ton of time talking about that, but the next one is Sauron Defeated. Is that right? Did I get that right? Sauron Defeated is our next.
Sauron Defeated, yeah.
A book for Academy. So that's what's happening around Signum. Here's what's happening in the next movie club. Night of the Living Dead. Great flick. Looking forward to that one. That'll be a really good discussion. And then, of course, so for those of you who've been following along all year, you know we've done 2 Star Wars films this year. And basically the only reason that we were allowed to do that was I had to let Kat talk about Fantastic Beasts. No, I mean, how could we not talk about Fantastic Beasts? The inspiration was our, now almost 2 years ago, our discussion on One Fantastic Rogue Beast, which, of course, talked about the original Fantastic Beasts movie along with Rogue One. And so we have to follow up with the next one. It's pretty much written in the charter. So
yeah, we've kind of decided that, well, as long as they keep making Harry Potter and Star Wars films, we might as well just keep following along with them, because why not?
Yeah.
The key is we're not doing a Star Wars film next year, which, speaking of, so everyone who was here last year knows that we actually announced during the campaign time last year, we announced during the webathon, in fact, our whole movie club idea and plan. And so we thought, what better time to announce what we're going to do next year? Surprise, surprise, it's pretty similar. We've really enjoyed this. We're tweaking a few things, but we've kind of put together here some of the movies that we're looking at as far as new movies. There's actually some slim pickings out there, especially when you take out all the sort of like superhero stuff that maybe don't offer quite as much for in-depth analysis. And
largely because, as we've discovered, a lot of the movies don't announce their dates this far in advance.
Well, and this is also true.
So we're kind of leaving the pickings a little, you know, they are a little slim, and we're going to leave a few slots open so that if something pops up down the line, we have some flexibility to make last minute decisions or switch things around a little bit. So for the new films, we're looking at Chaos Walking, which is based on a YA sci-fi series by Patrick Ness, who wrote Class, the Doctor Who spinoff that was out a few years ago. And that has Daisy Ridley and Tom Holland in it, so some, you know, well-known actors right now. And the screenplay was partially written by Charlie Kaufman, who wrote Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which we discussed in Movie Club. So that has sort of a lot of reasons for us to kind of be keeping an eye on it. Captive State is a movie that we planned to discuss last year, and then they moved it. So we're keeping that on the docket.
They moved it
assuming
like by 8
that
months,
really ever comes out. And then Artemis Fowl is something that neither of us know a lot about, but we know it's a popular series, so it seems like that might be a good thing to check out. So for the old movies, sort of like last year, we're kind of doing a little bit of a hybrid where we've narrowed down our slate a bit, but we're giving some choice and options to listeners. So what we're going to do is for each of these decades for the last 50 or so years, we're offering 2 films per decade. That sometime before the end of the year, we will, tweet this out as a poll that you can vote on which one from each of those decades you want us to talk about. So at the end, the best film wins, and that will be our list of older, not old, but older films that we'll talk about next year. And I think hopefully there's some good ones in there. So I'm interested to see what wins.
Yeah.
I noticed you guys have all like new old movies, like nothing from the 30s and stuff like we're doing tonight.
Well,
is this a sore topic?
No, it's not. It's just once you get, there are some options. We do have some options for perhaps future years. Even figuring out which version of She, which we can talk about, how many versions of She there are when we when we start here. But yeah, just even finding out, trying to figure out that was, kind of tough. I think, yeah, it does just get a little difficult when you go back further to kind of find, especially, I mean, I know for my own self, I'm not as familiar with a lot of the movies from that period too. And to be honest, when we called for nominations last year, we really didn't get that many. A lot of them were the ones we did get were mostly newer ones. I think the furthest nomination we got back was from the 50s anyway, and we kind of go back almost that far here.
Yeah,
so,
I think we went digging to find She to get something.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly a matter of knowing what from the era that is fantasy and science fiction is worth talking about.
Right.
And it's hard enough to know, to be expert enough in the, 1930s films, let alone figuring out, of the science fiction, genre, which are the ones which are going to give us enough, to discuss. So it does get a little bit difficult. But if people do have suggestions, we are open for them for future sessions. So our emails are always available. If you know of a film, or if you bump across, come across one at some point, let us know and we'll see if we can fit it in somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is with the tweaking this year, we did want to kind of give 2 options per decade, but we also didn't want to have 10 decades worth of stuff.
Right.
Because I mean, right here, this is 9 films, and while we did sort of say slim pickings, I mean, in 2018 we did 10 films, so we're only leaving room for one other edition, which actually we should mention. If you really, really, really want to do a film, if you donate $1,000 to Signum University, you do get a special session of your choice among a number of different programs, one of which is the Mythgard Movie Club. So if there's a film that's not on here and you really, on the last slide, I should say, if you really, really want to do one and, that's a way you want to support Signum, then we will absolutely do the film of your choice within keeping within sort of the purpose of Movie Club as far as, being a speculative film in nature. But yeah, we're totally open to adding 1 or 2 or even 3 if people are willing to donate that. All right.
Awesome.
So all of that said, let's talk about She. So Corey, you said you just read the book.
Yes.
You read the book.
Yeah. Well, obviously. Yeah. How else do you read things?
Wow. We won't get into that debate here, but yeah. So I mean, obviously, the book. It came out. It was one of those serialized books, and then was sort of put together as a novel form. Has a lot of influence on a lot of different writers and stuff. But yeah, I don't know, maybe we could just go around and kind of give impressions, thoughts, or experience with the book. I mentioned I read it for Doug Anderson's class. I enjoyed it. I don't know that I had any, distinct things to say about it off the top of my head, but yeah, maybe just let's go around and kind of give what all your thoughts about the book and where we kind of can go into talking about the film adaptation.
Well, I'll just say kind of the same for me. That's the only Haggard that I've ever read, and it was for Doug Anderson's course, which is a few years ago now, so it's straining my memory to remember the novel in any detail. But there are certain, the kind of basic shape of the story and the impressions that it left are a little more strong than the particular details. So, yeah.
Well, Doug's class was the roots of Tolkien, so we were all reading it with Tolkien in mind and the different references that seemed to resonate with him. Kor, the name of her land and the name of Tolkien's early land of the elves in like the 19-teens and 20s. And she had a mirror in the book, right, where she can pour the water and see the future, or see what Horace Hawley is doing, or no, Horace is seeing what Leo's doing elsewhere, and that has been compared to Galadriel's mirror in Lothlorien.
Yeah.
So that's really the lens through which I read the book.
Yeah.
Most of what I remember.
The thing that I was really struck by, and I know it's a little bit unfair because I'm like, I just read it last week, but the thing that was really striking me as I was reading it is the way I think, and this is something I know, when I think of Rider Haggard, I often think about several of the comments that C.S. Lewis makes about Rider Haggard. He's one of his favorite examples to kind of talk about when he's.
I have a slide about that.
You have a slide about that? Okay,
yeah. We can actually go
to advance.
Yeah,
we do not go quite in order here,
No.
like you do, Corey. We're not as linear.
The mythopoeic gift of Rider Haggard, that's exactly what I was just going to talk about, is that, I was really struck by the way in which, so, Lewis always talks about the wonderful job that, Haggard's books do of just sort of creating this really mythic world and this sense of awe, in the discovery of the strange and bizarre, but not just arbitrarily bizarre. And in She in particular, I found it much more powerful than King Solomon's Mines, which is the other Rider Haggard I'd read most recently, mostly because I loved the way that he built like this layer upon layer of antiquity, right? So of course you've got She. Now, by the way, what do you think is the consensus about how we pronounce her name? Like, it's Ayesha, right? How many syllables? Is it Ayesha or is it Ayesha, or what do you? I'm not really confident.
I think I read in looking it up that at least for Haggard, he said it should have been pronounced like Asha or something like that. But I think, but I don't know that. But it sounds to me like it has been ignored. Like a lot of people would say it's Ayesha or
Ayesha, yeah, it looks like a consonantal Y rather than a vowel Y, the way it's fit. But anyway, the audiobook reader did read it as two syllables. So I guess they paid attention to Haggard anyhow. Anyway, so you've got Ayesha at the center, right? And she's like more than 2,000 years old. And so the sort of the impossible antiquity of she herself as this living survivor of the ancient world. And of course, to me, one of the most delightful parts of the book was hearing her talk about, when he refers to the Romans and she's like, oh yes, so they actually made something of themselves, did they? Oh, okay. They're like, it's like, oh, those young Romans, like I always knew they would do something interesting, because she is more ancient than the Romans. She remembers the Greeks. She, was a contemporary of the Egyptians. So we have her as this like living relic of what we always think of as the ancient world, right? But of course, we get to that from England, right? We start in England, and then we sort of work backwards. So here's this like through the story of Leo's father, as he tells it to Holly before the father dies, about their lineage, the lineage of the Vincies, right, and how they can trace it all the way back to ancient Greece. So we get this like line of history stretching from England all the way back to the the ancient Mediterranean world, and then of course we go back and they sort of follow that sort of mental and imaginative trail, a trail of crumbs, right, until they get to Ayesha herself, and this sort of, again, this living memory of that. But she herself is within Kor, which is a lost civilization, which is as ancient to her as she is to modern England, right? So, you've got like the people of Kor, which were this great and mighty and advanced civilization. It's like Atlantis, except landlocked, right? Which has been lost, and there's no traces, and nobody even remembers that they ever existed. But they were, they were great, and had who knows what technology prior even to the beginnings of Egypt or anything like that. So the way in which we get these like sort of the sort of continual unfolding of deeper and deeper into antiquity until they're standing there looking at the huge mound of the ancient dead, the skeletons and desiccated corpses of the people of Kor, seeing the fall of this great civilization, and the climactic scenes take place within the these ruins, not just the tombs where they spend most of their time, but the old city of Kor, and yeah, the way that invokes the connections, Chris, thinking about that connection back to to Kor and Cortirion, right, with Tolkien, that concept of the ancient lost city, of the mighty ones of of whom only a memory is left in the modern world, thinking of the way that Tolkien did with the elves and humans in England in the Book of Lost Tales, right, back when Kor was the primary word for it, you can see how this kind of, that sort of mythopoeic vision really really appealed to Tolkien, and that I found really interesting and really powerful. And I was super interested to see how differently the film handled that, right? Which was, I don't know. I'm still kind of processing it, actually, exactly what the film did with that. They clearly didn't want that level of antiquity. There was not anything like the same sense of, we got like, this is an undiscovered country kind of thing with Kor in the film, but we certainly didn't get that like, and this was impossibly ancient before the ancient civilizations even began, right? There's none of that kind of back into the mists of time that we are traveling imaginatively. It never really happens in the film, which okay, like I guess that's not what they were going for. I was just kind of interested in the fact that they weren't interested in that, because it seemed such a central concept in the book. But that's okay. I guess not everybody has to be into the same thing.
Yeah, in the movie it seems a lot more like Shangri-La, like
yes,
that's what they're playing on, and you see the statues in that one ceremony scene, all the giant statues above them, and they look very Buddhist or Cambodian. And then even Vincey's ancestor isn't from ancient Greece. He's from like the Renaissance or the end of the Renaissance. He's only 500
like 1500 or something. Yeah.
That was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we were searching for something from the 30s or the 40s to kind of include, and stumbled across this movie, we got really excited at first, because we thought, at first we kind of forgot our Inklings history and thought that this was maybe one of the films that Tolkien and Lewis, we knew that there was that section where Lewis complains about changes to a Rider Haggard story. It's actually King Solomon's Mines.
King Solomon's Mines.
We thought maybe they went and saw this movie together. We got all jazzed about this. But I don't. Maybe they saw this movie. It's still possible.
Still possible.
We don't know. But I think I think that's on Stories, where Lewis talks about, he complains about the changes to, it's like they're on a cliff instead of a cave-in, or whatever. Like he talks about the substitution of different kinds of danger, and how you can still have danger, but when it's a different kind of danger, that's going to change the quality of the story. And he complains about the introduction of female character in shorts who just follows them around and doesn't do anything, and all these sorts of changes that were made, and sort of how they don't serve the atmosphere, of the story, or so I feel like even though he's not talking about she, that's still kind of a relevant question, because we get those sorts of substitutions that you're just talking about, right? Where it's not that it's doing something entirely different, but it switches out one type of thing for something else. And it does that in a number of places, like whether it's types of characters or what their background is or what they look like or where is the location of the city and all these sorts of details. It's still recognizably the same. It's based on the same story, but we get enough of those things that I guess that's a question I have for the group, is sort of to what extent do those changes affect the mythopoeia or the atmosphere, the kind of story element of it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great question. And thinking of the antiquity, Chris, as you're pointing out, like it's 1500, right? Or back to the year 1500 instead of the year, like, a couple centuries BC is when the for Callicrates, who is the ancestor of Leo Vinci in the book. I guess John Vinci is a slightly, it's a little easier for her to be like, it's my John Vinci, rather than to her constantly saying, oh, my Callicrates, which she does all the time in the book, which maybe that wouldn't have played in modern cinema quite as well, but
a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a mouthful. And I'm kind of wondering, though, again, like it's a significant, it's not just any mouthful, it's a Greek mouthful, right? So it conveys in the book, it conveys this, like the sense, the connection to ancient Greece, right? But anyway, I can't help but wonder is, and I felt embarrassed thinking this way in part, but I still think I kind of might be right. Because like on the one hand, I'm making a generalization, which is a little bit embarrassing, but I'm like, is it just an American thing? Like, is it because to Americans, the year 1500 seems like the ancient, long forgotten past, whereas like to a British audience, 1500 is like the week before last, right? And so you have to go back to ancient Greece and Rome to get a sense of antiquity. Whereas again, for Americans, like, this dates back to the year 1500 is like, whoa, before the foundations of the world, I don't know, like, or did they think it would have the same effect? But of course, because one of the other consequences, right, is linguistic. Because she met an English-speaking person in 1500, she knows English, and so they can speak, and she's taught everybody else English. Whereas, of course, in the book, they're all speaking Arabic, and Rider Haggard renders it as English, but it's understood that they're all speaking Arabic the whole time. So, whereas that fiction is a little harder to maintain on film. If we're like pretend we're all speaking Arabic the whole time, is a little bit weirder on screen, I think, than so that's of course another consequence of shifting it forward, 1500 years. But to me, but Kat, getting back to your question, to me, one of the things that was, I think, most shocking, well, certainly most shocking in that it was the thing that made me like kind of reel back most forcibly when watching the film, was the location. Like the Arctic? Seriously? We're at the North Pole? And I'm like, well, that's pretty far from like equatorial Africa. I gotta say, it's like as far as you can get from the equatorial swamps around Kor in the book. And it was funny.
I watched the movie last weekend, and then Curtis and I talked on Monday for our podcast. And I was like, now it's been a while since I read the book, but they were in Africa, right? Did I completely gloss over that?
Most of the book, right?
Almost the entire book, except for the initial part when they set off from England.
Well, I did a little research, as librarians tend to do, and one of the academic articles on this said that the movie makers, there had been so many movies set in Africa in the 30s that they wanted to not repeat that. And one of the designers or directors was like, I want a saber-toothed tiger. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what this one article said. I think that there might have been an issue with some of the portrayals of Africans in 1935 America.
Maybe.
And
Maybe.
it's kind of safer to have Neanderthals living in caves.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and one of the other things that struck me is there is one sense, I think, in which it's actually, so again, Kat, getting back to your question, this was a huge change, right? And at first, my thought was exactly along Lewis's line. I'm like, okay, the kind of hardships that you can go through hardships at least as severe, right, in the Arctic wilderness as you can in the equatorial swamps, but it's not the same kind of danger, right? It's going to be a very different story. But I was kind of surprised at the extent to which that ended up not being true. Like once we got into the caves, we were fine. It might as well have been Africa, right? As long as we were in there. In fact, there was a kind of a comical moment because I had told my son that the basic premise, and because he had been there when I was watching the beginning of the film, and I expressed verbally my surprise about the Arctic setting. And later on, he's looking over my shoulders. They're there in the caves, and they had just when they were captured by the first group of natives who are going to hot pot them. By the way, that's my favorite part of the whole book is the use of the verb hot pot. To hot pot someone. But anyhow, so just as they're about to get hot potted, my son's looking over my shoulder and he's like, aren't those people a little scantily clad for the Arctic? And I'm like, well, it's in a cave. Just work with it.
There's
it's
thermal
warm.
vent. It's really warm. It's like a sauna.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
an Arctic sauna through the whole land. It's fine. Everything really good central heating there in the Arctic.
They can grow papayas.
Grow papayas, absolutely. They never found the papaya trees, which I was a little bit disappointed by. But yeah, so I mean, that whole sense of like, okay, really, so the Arctic setting didn't impact in the end. I found it didn't really impact at all the central kind of mythopoeic vision of the story. Because it was and any more than like, I mean, let's face it, the equatorial swamps weren't a major player in the book either, right? It was an obstacle they had to surpass in order to get there. But once they got there, again, it was pretty similar as far as the overall feel and what they were going for. But the other thing, though, that I couldn't help but reflect on, and here I was thinking of comments made by both Lewis and Tolkien at different points, the timing seems to me coincidental as well. Again, whether this was something they were explicitly going for or what. But I mean, you think back to, the middle of the second half of the 19th century, and Africa is still like an exciting frontier, right? I mean, it's not been so many years since we discovered the source of the Nile, and we're still, stories of Dr. Livingstone and all that kind of thing, right? I mean, Africa is a big deal, right? Well, in the first half of the 20th century, the Arctic is a big deal, right? I mean, this was 1935 is still right in the middle of like polar expedition after polar expedition. So thinking about how, again, how both Lewis and Tolkien talk about, like the frontier of the unknown, right? In order to tell a story that takes place imaginatively in an unknown, undiscovered country, you have to kind of, it used to be enough to say, in German fairy stories, right? Like in the middle of the forest, right, is where the mysterious things happen. And then you move it out to the islands, and then you move it, to deepest, darkest Central Africa, right? Then you move it to the Arctic, and then you move it to outer space, which it seems fairly clear is where it would be next, right? So like the next adaptation of She would clearly, like in 1970 or something, would have been on the moon, right? Presumably where they find the ancient culture or something like that, and in order to achieve a similar kind of effect. So this is why, although I was already, like, as soon as they said Arctic, Kat, I was thinking exactly along the lines that you were. I'm like, exchanging one danger for another. I was totally doing the C.S. Lewis on stories thing, and I'm like, okay, that's going to be really good to talk about. But then I discovered, actually, no, like the way that they deployed it, the function that it really seemed to have in the film, was really actually along very similar lines. I didn't feel like they did do really the King Solomon's Mines thing, not there anyway, not with that, with the setting element.
Well, and I guess maybe because the Arctic is really just the way to something else. That the whole film, like as you said, once they're in the caves, they're scantily clad natives. It's not like the whole film is an Arctic adventure.
Exactly.
There's this sort of Arctic period that they have to get through. And then once they're kind of through the portal of these caves, they're in another world, which could be presumably set anywhere.
Right.
So, whereas I think that would be different if the entire setting had been changed.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I just looked up Lost Horizon was made in 37, so that would have been 2 years after this. So, you know, maybe Asia was the great big frontier at that time, or the Siberia.
Well, and we should note too that some of the later books in the Ayesha series are set in like Tibet, in the Himalayas and everything. So some of these things, things that we're thinking of as substitutions, might be that they're pulling it from other novels in the series and mixing and matching them a little bit.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because there was quite a gap between some of those sequels as well, like 20 years or so. I think, you know, in some of them. And Corey, so in talking through sort of like the Lost World genres, like you said, like you know, you have like these different sort of frontiers that gets pushed out. It reminded me of sort of Dr. Sturgis's contention throughout her science fiction, you know, 2 classes that she does for Signum, where she talks a lot about that idea of the frontier, and especially sort of the Frederick Jackson Turner essay on, you know, significance of the frontier, not just in history but into science fiction and all of that. And you can definitely see that sort of thing, and there's clearly a sort of crossover and blending between the Lost World genre and into science fiction, and you know, threw up some examples. One of the sort of like traditional Lost World genre, but then, you know, how you know, there's quite a few sci-fi that at least sci-fi stories that at least have elements of that same idea, up to and including today. I mean, after I kind of saw the quote, I'm not sure if it was Chris or Kat who put that in there, but yes, got to thinking, you know, things like Ring World, where it's like not just like the Ring World itself is, you know, a lost civilization, but there's like lost civilizations within Ring World that they like continue to discover, or something like Stargate, both the film and the TV series. Like the TV series is like one lost civilization after another. It's like, oh, we're gonna go through the Stargate and find another lost civilization this week, you know, and kind of
is that like Monster of the Week? Lost Civilization of the Week.
I mean, it's 10 seasons long, so there are some arcs, but you know, after a while, they need to just kind of have that civilization of the week.
Well, one thing that's the frontier now is virtual reality, and I'm thinking of the Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle movie, where that's like a lost civilization inside a video game that they get pulled into. So we're going farther and farther to get our frontiers now.
Yeah, exactly.
Arthur says that the 2007 version of She, I think, was set in a post-apocalyptic dystopia. So there you go. It's astounding to me how many times this book has been adapted. I did not realize that before. Like, this 1935 is the 5th version, which is kind of incredible. And I linked on Twitter to the George Méliès 1 minute long short, which is, I guess, the first filmed version, if you can call it that, of She, which I hope everybody can go and look it up. It's 1 minute long and pretty awesome. So it's kind of amazing that they were adapting it as far back as 1899.
Speaking of awesome, these movie posters are kind of amazing.
Aren't
I have
they
to
amazing?
say. She who must be obeyed. Okay, right. She who must be loved. Well, yes. Okay, there's a compulsion there. So that's an interesting pairing. She who must be possessed. Well, now hang on a second. If there's anyone doing the possessing around there, it's, you know, she's not a, but I'm sorry. I know nothing about that adaptation. But the idea that they're turning it like that, like making her an object instead of the
she's an object in all of these posters. She's not in a position of authority in any of them, really.
Yes, that
like
well,
kitten with a
except
whip there.
arguably the one where she's wearing almost nothing and carrying a whip. There's a certain degree of authority.
Barbarella kind of thing there.
Yeah, but no, I agree. Actually, even more shocking is the one on the left, right, where she's in the Princess Leia pose from the Star Wars movie, and
That's what I thought too. Oh yeah.
it's almost exactly the posture. In fact, it's almost making me wonder if the Princess Leia image is an imitation of that, because it's so cool.
The costume's pretty similar too.
Yes, it looks exactly like, well, not quite exactly, but it looks a lot like Slave Leia. It really does. But anyway, yes, the idea of her being in the Slave Leia posture is absurd, absolutely absurd. Yeah, there's no question of who is possessing whom when it comes to she who must be obeyed. But wow, yeah, that's really startling.
It really is, and she has fewer and fewer clothes on, as we go through these. The one from '68 just astounds me that they could even publish that poster. It's just
Yes. I mean, that's the one that is, of the four of them, obviously the one way furthest over the edge into pornography, and the whip, like, I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember that part in the book.
No, not a literal whip. I mean, this maybe metaphorically. Yeah. Oh, that's a Hammer film? Okay.
It's a Hammer film. It was the sequel to the Ursula Andress one. And they couldn't get her to come back, so they got somebody else that looked like her.
Oh, wait, hang on. I didn't read the subtitle. The ultimate female. Oh, great. That's a wonderful beginning. The ultimate female who used. So this is it. We've visually depicted the ultimate. This is our idea of the ultimate female.
Margaret Thatcher, step aside.
Yeah, exactly. Who used her beauty and her body, separate commodities there, which is interesting, to bring kingdoms to their downfall and men to their knees. Okay. Wow. That's something.
What? There's more. Discover the excitement of that's the
Olenka
actress,
Barova,
a new screen beauty in the body of a what?
Woman.
Can't read it. In the body. Oh, okay. Is that optional?
She's a screen beauty in the body of a woman.
Is she sometimes not in the body of a woman?
Well, if she's in the body of a woman, then I'll definitely watch it. I was a little plus minus before you reassured me on that point, but oh man, the vengeance of she.
Yeah,
I don't even know what that means.
Sharon was also commenting on the Luke and Leia-esque poses.
Yeah, it looks just like Luke and Leia. That's really, I mean, except like Egyptian, but is he? Well, hang on a second. The scantily clad Egyptian dude, who is being clung to, he's bound to the wall, isn't he? Shackled to the wall.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I thought he was carrying something in his hand, like a snake or something. But then I'm like, no, that's like a manacle or something. He's stapled to the wall, that guy, and yet she's clinging to him, like she's supplicating him, though she's obviously imprisoned him.
Don't leave me. I can't.
Yeah, she's like, I can't. What do you want? I mean, I'm stapled to the wall over here. Right? Yeah. I mean, that's wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. Where do we go from all this?
I prefer the George Méliès version.
They look very, very clothed.
It is, and I think, Chris, you pointed this out, I think maybe before we started broadcasting too, just to go back there though, that one of the things that's going on in sort of all of these different adaptations is that they seem to be looking back, well, maybe not the 25 one, but they're all sort of reflecting back on the earlier adaptations, and none of them are really looking at the source material itself.
Nobody's read the book.
Yeah, and so of course maybe that's why it gets further and further away from the book, because they're just taking what they like from the previous adaptation or adaptations and just sort of like building on that rather than.
Can you go 2 slides ahead?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like here. You can see Helen Gahagan on the left and how her costume is reflected, in the later 1960s versions, and her throne and the headdresses and the flowy gowns, and nothing like Ryder describes it in the book.
Nothing. She is the one thing that the only element of the visual depiction of Ayesha herself that to me seemed to really be dealing with something from the book was the very opening introduction to her when she was in that awesome like cloud screen thing, like the vapor that was coming up from the floor. The combination of the vapor and her billowy dress was super cool, and it created this sense of like she is behind the, and she when she was speaking behind it, right behind that like veil of mist, right, that was really cool. That really struck me as sort of similar to the kind of effect that Haggard was building throughout. But once she stepped through the mist, it was all like, I'm wearing sparkly gold things and a golden hat. And I was surprised that she was as fully clothed as she was. I expected it to be scantier than it was, her costume. I mean, she's up to the chin most of the time. She rarely shows any skin at all, which again, I was not assuming. I mean, Haggard is not, she's naked a bunch of times in the book, completely naked. So, now, I mean, of course, like to the great peril of the sanity of the men around, obviously, right? Like, I mean, if she unveils herself, then you're completely like cooked for life. You would just, you're overwhelmed. But nevertheless, like she seems to do that on a number of occasions anyway, in the book. So that was one of the elements that really did surprise me. But yeah, no, I mean, Chris, you make a really good point. I mean, as you can see, these later adaptations do seem to be, even down to the color of the dress, in the bottom right-hand corner there. It really is. And this is something that's so easy to forget about when you're thinking about a particular Hollywood film adaptation. And it's easy to get sucked into just thinking about its relationship to the book, when of course you really need to be thinking possibly first and foremost about its relationship to other Hollywood movies, which is at least as influential on it as its relationship to the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you kind of search for it too, the thing that kept coming up on like movie blogs and movie history sites and everything was the Art Deco of the style, like of her headdress and the architecture and the costuming and everything. So again, like that relationship to the period that it's being made rather than the period it's depicting in any sort of realistic archaeological sense. I mean, there's certain aspects of it that like there were moments where I could see like, okay, this is sort of Egyptian or this is sort of Mayan, or you could kind of see real world reference. But then, you look at her crown here and you see New York skyscrapers.
Absolutely.
Like, more than anything else.
Building on her head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know how all the feathers and the eagle theme creeped in there, but very disturbing.
Yeah, that's a little different.
Yeah, in two of them. Yeah.
Well, I think, in the book she's veiled all the time because men who see her would fall under her spell. But it would be really hard to do an hour-and-a-half movie with your main actress covered in a veil. I mean, could you say that again? I couldn't quite hear you.
Exactly. She is veiled. I mean, like, she does wear a veil, but it's like a very thin diaphanous veil. It doesn't conceal anything. So again, it looks like they're kind of trying to gesture towards it, but I agree. It would not, having her muffled up all the way through the film would not really go over very well. Could you go back to the previous slide? I was really glad that you put those pictures up because I was completely thinking of, this is Maleficent, isn't it?
This is the evil queen from Snow White.
Snow White, right? Yeah. I was thinking of her, especially the top left picture when she was in this outfit here. I was like, oh my goodness, that is straight Disney Queen, and I couldn't place it immediately which one it was. I'm like, I had the picture, but yes, it was the Snow White Queen. Was extremely striking. how similar?
Apparently, one of the costumers on She was a art designer on Snow White. So there you go.
Okay. So
And they're only a couple of years apart, right? Like
They're only a couple of years apart. Now, one of the animators says, no, it wasn't that. It was this statue from the 11th century of this German Ute von Bettenberg or something, Ballenstedt. He said, no, it's really her. But you can see some of both of those in the Evil Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and who's to say that the She costume wasn't drawing on Ute von, what's her name? Like, maybe they were both kind of referencing the same historical,
Well, and if you look at
model.
their thrones, they both have this sort of Art Deco peacock feather kind of thing going on, and that sort of sealed the deal for me.
Yeah. No, it's it's mostly the kind of black wimple thing. The black wimple and crown look was the primary thing that I couldn't get away from. Because that, to me, that's the most idiosyncratic element of the evil queen in Snow White, right? I mean, like the high cowl is interesting, right? The purple and black and red robe is interesting. The fact that she has like a rope tied around her waist instead of any more fancy belt than that is interesting. But I mean, to me, the most idiosyncratic element of her costume is the wimple that she has going on there. And yeah, so when I saw the wimple crown combo in She, I was like, okay, all right, that's very interesting.
And unusual for a wimple, she's got a widow's peak, like cut into her wimple. You can see on the lower left that Helen Gahagan has a slight widow's peak in the dark hair.
Right.
So I think it's a pretty obvious inspiration.
No, I don't think that was. I'm not a Disney connoisseur, but that was hard even for me to miss.
So, Corey, you're somewhat famous in your Lotro streams for looking at architecture. Any architectural? I don't know that we had a ton of them, but there's a couple pictures on here where maybe we could. I mean, we've obviously talked about the Art Deco styles and that sort of thing.
It was on the top left here, the hall with all those statues, which we've talked about a little bit already, was definitely the one that I found most interesting. The combination of that and the doors, right? Think of the huge emphasis that's placed on the enormity of the door. Like they come to the door and like the like ragamuffin Neanderthal dude has to be lowered down so that he can beat on the huge drum, right? Which is the signal for them to open the doors ponderously from the inside. That whole sequence was really hilarious. But I mean, this is hugely elaborate, like we must go through this process to open the mighty doors of Kor. That sense of, that was one of the few places, again, I think the film conveyed, for me anyway, much less powerfully the sense of, again, like antiquity, like you are seeing into not just a lost civilization, but an incredibly ancient civilization. I mean, Holly, the functionally main character, the narrating character anyway, of the book, actually says at one point, he's like, how very old the world is, like that's his reaction, that this sense of we are just these, like in time, our lives are these tiny specks compared to the anyway, the film doesn't really convey that, but it does convey magnitude, right? It's a lost civilization instead of an ancient civilization necessarily, but it's big in scale, right? Or at least their architecture is big in scale. The people themselves were a little unimpressive, and that was my least favorite element of their depiction, is that I guess, so you've got the three classes of people in the like underground warm Arctic caves, papaya growing caves, right? You've got the Neanderthal cannibal hot potters on the outside, right? You've got she herself is like in a category of her own, right? Separate from everyone. And then you've got the others, like, so those who come to rescue them from the hot potters and who are the primary servants of She, which I guess, if I understood properly, those are the people of Kor. Like, they're still around. you know, and that I didn't like. You know, there was not that third category at all in the book. In the book, there was just, you know, the like savage, occasionally cannibalistic African tribes who serve she, right? And there are some who are more wise and some who are less wise among them, but it's just the African tribe and she. And the people of Kor, of course, are long gone. It's a setting that kind of contextualizes all of them. The introduction of that like separate people was kind of interesting, but I found that I don't know, to me it kind of weakened things, right? I mean, I had a hard time, I guess mostly because having just read the book, I was all like, ooh, the people of Kor, right? The ancient, lost master civilization, which tragically was. And so when they're like, I'm like, those are the people of Kor? Those people are super disappointing. Like, I'm not
Martha
very
Graham
impressed.
dancers? You didn't like the Martha Graham dancers there?
Okay, actually, I really kind of loved the dancing, actually. I thought that was actually, I was, like when we started to do an extended dance number, I will admit I started kind of rolling my eyes, but after a while I'm like,
cool.
Okay, actually this is pretty good.
Well, and I'd read that the one Oscar nomination that this had was for the dance, and so there's the bit in the beginning with the hot potters where it's sort of a little ceremonial, and I was thinking like, okay, that was like fine, like, you know, whatever. And then it got, you know, into that big climactic ceremony, and there was that moment of, here we go. Like this is what we've been waiting for, the big, you know, song and dance spectacle at the end. And I guess that's like what we can trust these 1930s productions to do, is this spectacle. Like, so Merian C. Cooper was the producer behind King Kong, and this was going to be his big follow-up. So I think that's what they're sort of, rather than into the people and the characters, the spectacle and the, you know, glamour and all that sort of thing is really going into these incredible sets, which I do think are, I'm no connoisseur of 1930s film, but to me they seem quite spectacular and impressive.
Yes.
Well, and all the more so because it was supposed to be filmed in color. So when you think about, I mean, they didn't, because they didn't have the money to do the filming. I'm sure the sets were all probably bright and colorful, and I mean, we can question how well the recolorization, you know, in 2008 captured that, but I'm sure, you know, those are probably much more impressive even, you know, if you saw them in there. And Sharon's mentioned it twice, so we have to say the big doors are from King Kong as well.
Nice reuse. Very good.
Which, like Kat said, you know, Merian C. Cooper had done that film. So it's not only other versions of she that they're sort of pulling from, I guess. At least, you know, visually, you kind of have that. I'm guessing people at the time, you know, because King Kong was only, a few years before this. So I'm sure people at the time noticed it, you know, in the movie as well.
With
anybody else?
Sorry.
Go
ahead, Chris.
I know, I'm just saying, did anybody else think Ember and Umber when they saw those two bighorn sheep?
I did not, but that's great.
Now I will.
Okay, good.
In terms of the visual similarities to on the picture on the right of her temple space, I guess that's sort of Art Deco as well, although having just done our thing on Edward Scissorhands, I was thinking of all the like German expressionism photos we were looking at, with that, like the kind of very high contrast black and white, you know, odd weird angles and sort of gothic shapes and everything.
Yeah, and I mean, there is quite a mishmash of styles all throughout the not just the architecture, but the costumes and sort of the portrayals as well. Even just like in the dance number, it's like, wait, what civilization are we like sort of mimicking here? Is it Egyptian or Asian or Native American sometimes? Like,
All of them.
Quite,
1930s modernism, yeah.
yeah.
All of them. And you know, like obviously it's not the same level of spectacle, right? But the drumming and dancing leading up to the hot potting ritual was actually kind of good too. Like I particularly enjoyed the drumming as they like began to like build their momentum towards like the cannibalistic climax of the hot pot ritual. Or it was really not a hot pot, it was like a hot helmet, which looked cooler. I mean, like the demon mask helmet thing that they had was kind of cool. But it's not a hot pot.
I
So.
couldn't help but think of Game of Thrones heading
Yeah,
into
yeah,
that.
Oh,
exactly.
Viserys.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah, I was thinking
Mount
of
Hurricane.
I was thinking of that when I was when I got to that point in the book. I was like, hey, George R. R. Martin brought back the hot pot. That's kind of cool, right? That's great. But yeah. Anyway, no. Like I said, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed the dance numbers. The temple sequence, though, that was one of the places that I found one of the things that I found most purely, I don't know, jarring. It's just how they get there, right? So it's a chase scene, right? He's interrupted the ritual. Leo interrupts the ritual by going and rescuing what's her name?
Tanya.
Tanya, yeah, the like extra female lead, or rather the extra like. It's a good thing we managed to collect a white woman along the way, right? Or else we might have had to have him fall in love with a native like he does in the book, right? Which would have been scandalous. So anyway, phew, okay, we picked up a white woman. That's easy now. But anyhow, so when he rescues Tanya, and then everyone's trying to kill him, right? And we're escaping through the huge doors, right, which we're holding shut with a spear. And then of course we get the jumping over the cliff scene, which is being focused on here in the central picture. Those two, which I was kind of surprised. Again, see, that's one moment, Kat, where I was strongly feeling the C.S. Lewis thing, right? Like the danger of being
danger for the sake of danger.
Yeah, well, and a different kind of danger, right? So that scene in the book is really well done. I mean, Haggard is really good at this kind of thing, right? As Lewis describes, you know, conveying that sense of, just as in King Solomon's Mind, the danger that he conveyed, you know, the effect that he conveyed was that sense of despair and, you know, sort of horrible, prolonged, you know, suffocation of being shut into the tombs of the dead and knowing that you can't escape and you're going to slowly starve to death in the tombs of the dead, you know, the silent, dark tombs of the dead. So in She, we get the trip to her, you know, where the fire is, the fire of life, and, you know, how they have to cross these increasingly perilous precipices and things, and the tipping rock, right, which they kind of brought back in the film, that they had to crawl across the plank too, right, and then they lost the plank, and you know, so just that sense of like I am standing above an unending chasm, so doing that, but then saying, okay, but wouldn't it be cooler if they were being chased by somebody, you know, when they were going through there? That really totally changed. There's none of that same sense of vertigo that you get from the reading of those scenes in the book, which again, really powerfully conveyed, I thought, in the book. And then in the film, it's like, first of all, as you can see in the bottom central picture there, you can bear they try to convey the precariousness of it, right, by showing it super wide angle from a distance, with the result that you can barely even see the little figures jumping, which I suppose also kind of helped, because presumably they were not actually jumping from one precipice to another, the actors, you know, when they were doing this. So it presumably helps the effect too. But I did not get the sense of danger right there. And the sense of danger, the kind of danger that was being conveyed there was certainly not assisted by a chase scene, and then ending up, as we see depicted in the picture, the painting there, not the still, when they push the tipping rock over and knock a bunch of the Corites or whatever they're called down into the cliff with it. Again, one of the most powerful moments of that whole sequence in the book is, when they make this highly perilous crossing, at extreme risk of plummeting to their deaths. And then the plank that they use to get across is lost, right? So they're there on the tipping rock, and there's this sense not only like we could still fall any second, but how are we going to get home, right? Like we can't, there's no way out again because we lost the plank. Nothing like that. And then they push the rock over, turn the corner, and then bam, they're in the temple. And there's she, like,
already there.
Waiting with dialogue, like, what took you so long? And I'm like, wait, they're just trying to kill, and but we're fine now. Everything's fine, right? No problems. Bygones at that point. And now let's proceed to the fire of life. That was, as I say, that was really the only part of the film that I found quite jarring. That I was just like, okay, this has really lost me imaginatively, fairly completely.
No, and that's funny because not having read it in several years, I wasn't thinking about that. And so I think the sequence worked better for me just as coming to the film sort of more clean, and as the spectacle of kind of, wow, look what they were able to do in sort of 1935 with that technology, when you don't have that comparison in the back of your mind. Then your attention sort of shifts a little bit. So, but in hearing you describe it, I had the same thought that Sharon had. She's bringing up the Mines of Moria escape in the Fellowship of the Ring, which that's a similar sort of scenario where it is perilous in the book. It's never, you're never free from the sense of danger, but it's not sort of the quality is different. The danger is more what's coming behind you, and sort of this need to get out of there quickly, out of this sort of twisty, sheer rocks and everything. It's not the sort of crumbling, stairwells and sort of having to sort of jump around, and the danger is more physical, I guess, rather than atmospheric.
But yeah, that whole scene gets undercut when she's already in the temple, and she's like, "Oh, you took the long way."
Right, exactly. Yeah. It made me wonder what would have happened had the people of Kor still been on their heels when they had come into the temple. I mean, that would have been an awkward moment, right? They're with their spears, and she's like, "Welcome," and they're like, "Okay, what do we do now?" Yeah, that was weird. That was weird. Ooh, another thing that I thought was one of the other really interesting things, the love triangle, right? The jealousy of the leader of the one guy of the people of Kor.
Oh, Bilali.
Yeah,
he was good.
And that's totally new. So there was the parallel character in the book, right? Ben Ali, I think. Anyway, I forget. Birali, Ben Ali, Belali, something like that. But he was just a white bearded old guy who was she's devoted servant, and there was no question of him casting longing glances at her. I mean, he was totally under her spell, but he did not consider himself a rival to, Callicrates. So that was, I was not shocked, but I was interested to see them add that element in.
Yeah, I think he was my favorite character because he had some emotional depth and You're not quite sure what game he was playing.
So, I mean, we've covered a lot of different stuff. I'm trying to think. We kind of went all out of order here. I'm just sort of looking back through. I think we hit a lot of the main topics we wanted to talk about. Does anyone listening have some additional thoughts or have questions about some things? I know, I think Arthur brought up before, just wanted to talk about the actress Helen Gahagan a little bit, just because she has kind of a storied life beyond this film even. And so, well, I don't know it fully. I think I saw some notes maybe from Chris. Were you the one who put those in there?
Yeah, this was her only film. She was a Broadway actress, and she thought this would be her big debut and lead to a film career. And it was the movie lost money, and that nobody ever put her to film again. But in the 40s, she became a politician, and she was a 2-term congresswoman from California. In the 50s, she ran for senator from California and lost to Richard Nixon. So that's really interesting. He called her the Pink Lady because he was trying to affiliate her with communism to get people to not vote for her. And she nicknamed him Tricky Dick.
Interesting.
Interesting impact on history.
Exactly. She got her revenge in the end.
Oh, and Sharon had asked before, and is bringing it up again, about, so she noted the Galadriel connection, which we talked about briefly, but wanted to know if there's any sort of similarities. Now, I've not been following the Mallory stuff. I haven't gotten to the Necrosorceress
you haven't
stuff
gotten to
yet.
the Necrophiliac Sorceress? Well, you know when you do. Yeah, so I read the book like only maybe a week or two after I was reading that section of Mallory with the Necrophiliac Sorceress, and I was surprised. I'm like, how is it that I'm reading two different literary works from two different periods within a 2-week span that feature a necrophiliac sorceress? Like, I'm just, now she's less explicitly necrophiliac. She's preserved, and I was actually really surprised that they kept that in the film, right? She has mummified
Preserved body, right?
the body, yeah, of her lover that she murdered, right? So she murders the original lover, like would-be lover, like the faithful husband who won't become her lover. She murders him and keeps the body and mummifies it and preserves it. And there's one of the most sort of creepy scenes. One of the most creepy scenes in the book was that when Holly sort of is sneaking out at night and wanders his way down into the deep tombs, where she is there like ranting over the mummified body of Callicrates, and that's one of the scenes where she like egregiously strips completely naked in order to then like dance and rant and like do magical things, which is uncertain what purpose it serves. So that was like kind of like uncomfortably erotic scene with the corpse, but it wasn't like the point. It was like preservation, right? And memory more than anything. In fact, there's a kind of, sorry, please forgive me the segue, but there is actually something kind of Galadriel like there, something like, again, like the elvish preservation, like to keep all things unchanged, right? That sense of her clinging to the body of her dead. I'm not suggesting anything necrophiliac about Galadriel, but I am saying that her impulse in the book seemed to be primarily like, again, just to like preserve. She's holding on to the mummified body is all about holding on to the memory, right? So this, and she burns it as soon as he comes back, right? When Leo Vinci shows up, and he's obviously the reincarnation of Callicrates, she incinerates Coikertes' his old corpse. She cremates it because she doesn't need it anymore, right? You know, now that is past, and now she has him back again. So yeah, whereas in Mallory, she's just like, if I can't have you alive, then I'll have you dead. And she describes her plans to like lay his mummified corpse in her bed and hug it and kiss it every night and stuff. So that's just
A rose
different.
for Hashemotep.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. So strikingly parallel but not identical between the two. But like I said, it was one of the things that most surprised me. Like, one of the ways in which they went further out of their way than I expected to preserve a detail from the book. I was surprised when he was introduced to like his own image, you know, his own preserved body there, you know, or rather, you know, John Vincey's preserved body, which looks exactly like him, and his remarks, you know, it was me lying there. I did not expect them to go there in the film. And it was a relatively short scene. You know, they didn't make sort of as much of it. Having gone there, they didn't make quite as much of it as I might have guessed that they would have. But yeah, it was interesting.
So the one other aspect that we haven't really talked about, not from a story perspective, but just kind of the reception, I guess, is that this movie did not do very well, which, you know, is maybe wasn't. I mean, it clearly wasn't the expectation given the success of King Kong. They were hoping this would be the big, you know, follow up, you know, for Merian C. Cooper and those working on it. I found one. There may be other contemporary reviews of it. The only one I found is sort of like mixed. I guess we could say was like, yeah, you know, fans of H. Rider Haggard might like it, but you know, there's not a lot there to like. Kind of in some ways, which is interesting, I think, considering what we were saying before about seeing what influence it did end up having. And I mean, there's been plenty of other movies that have maybe been considered flops, but have nonetheless been influential on later films. But I don't know, I find that to be somewhat interesting that it really didn't do well, at least in its initial release. Although it was then later released in 1949 with a few minutes cut. I'm not sure exactly what scenes they were that were cut, but apparently had something of a revival later and did quite well after that. And then, of course, was thought to be lost, or at least the original version was thought to be lost for some time due to studio fires. And then Buster Keaton, apparently a big not just actor, but film buff himself. And it was apparently not just this film, but he had whole collections of like original prints of movies from decades of movie history that he had kind of in his garage. And this was among them. And so it was able to be restored. And there's a whole collection of those films. There were some other, I think, lost films that were kind of to come out of that collection, which just from a, you know, sort of textual history, I guess, if we can call it that, and looking through, I mean, even the fact that we have the film, I guess at this point to even be talking about it is kind of a minor miracle itself. But again, just that idea that the influence that it's had and all of that, despite the sort of poor market performance and receptions, is kind of interesting as well.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing though about that review that you put in there. This is really fascinating because the guy who wrote the review is essentially saying this movie isn't very good, but if you're a Rider Haggard fan, you might like it, right? And he claims to like it because, you know, he calls himself an unrepentant Haggard fan, right? Because it had already become unfashionable to admit in adulthood that you liked H. Rider Haggard. And so he's commending it as a Haggard fan. But he obviously has not read She, or only read it decades ago.
I was just, yeah, he mentions the avalanches and the icebergs.
And the ice barrier. Yeah,
And
exactly.
Can I point out that this guy is Graham Greene? So it's not nobody, you know, it's like he of The Quiet American, and, you know, like this isn't a hack, you know, it's somebody who you would trust to kind of know what he's talking about. And like on the, you know, list of people who have stated themselves as influenced by Haggard, Graham Greene comes up on lists. And so, yeah, I think that's what he's saying, is he was more of a King Solomon's Mines fan, which seems to be the case if he doesn't remember that he wasn't sitting in the Arctic.
You know, you don't have to carry with you very detailed memories of the book to recall that it has nothing to do with the Arctic. You know, yeah.
Yeah, so he kind of seems to be positioning it as, I don't know if he would have called it some sort of guilty pleasure. Like, he's a Haggard fan, but doesn't seem entirely convinced of Haggard's merits as an author.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to say that his style was execrable, but to then add about the childishness of his invention, which...
That's always a buzzword, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if that comes out to a compliment or an insult. You know, it sounds like an insult, but maybe he meant it as a compliment, in a kind of strange backhanded compliment. I'm not really sure.
That's how I would take it, is it's sort of a backhanded compliment. Like, he kind of, it's intended to sound sort of kind, but I think it comes off a bit patronizing. Like, well, if you enjoy this sort of thing, then I guess you'll like this movie. Like, your kids will like it, so don't think too hard about it. It's sort of, that's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting to me that his putative review of the film sort of degenerates into a critique of the book, which he obviously hasn't read. Right?
So how many levels of crit fic is that? Like, is there concentric circles, like, of
Inception levels of crit fic?
I don't know. I mean, he's just kind of, I don't know. He's just sort of cheating, I guess. And so, I mean, it's just kind of sloppy, that, you know, I was ready to go along with it till he started talking about the Great Ice Barrier and the avalanche, but
so the one other tidbit, which is more of a trivia item, I guess, than anything that I'll mention, is that the one of the directors, Irving Pichel, went on to direct the movie Destination Moon, which of course was written by Robert Heinlein. So there's my Heinlein.
There you go.
And for which he received the a retro Hugo later. So that's actually a movie from the 50s that is on our longer list. It didn't make the short list for next year, but is a potential one that we could visit at some future year of the movie club. So
was there a pool cat for how long it would take him to mention Heinlein?
only in my own
no
mind.
But it happens, you know.
Well, I'd really love to just talk about Tanya for a little bit.
I wanted to kind of go back to the characters. Yeah,
the fact that she's kind of that she's definitely sitting in for Ustane. I mean, even the similarity of their names. Who was the African lover of Leo Vinci before he meets she. Just the 1930s use of the woman. You know, my favorite line from the film is, "Why are we taking the girl along with us?" And her father says, oh, because she can cook for us. And like nobody thinks that's funny. It's like serious.
Yeah. 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 Oh yeah. I seriously, like, that's like the mic drop argument, right? They're like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, of course. We can't cook our own food.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And then Leo tries to help her with the rabbit stew, and she's like, "Oh, you don't have to help me. It's what
You have to, exactly. What are you doing near food? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it was one of the things that I was a little surprised. So I expected Leo and Tanya's relationship to move along faster than it did. You know, when they were like kind of squaring off on either side of the rabbit stew pot, I was like, okay, based on where we are in the film, I don't think we've got much time here. You better hustle things along if they're going to get to a quasi-matrimonial state in time for her to be a real rival for she when he arrives, right? But they played that totally differently. Tanya, I should be careful using the pronoun she in this context. Tanya does not enter in as an established rival in the way that Ustani does in the book, right? They're already basically married, and Haggard essentially implies that they're sleeping together already. Mm-hmm. He's discreet about it, but that certainly is what he suggests. I think it's pretty clear. Whereas again, like, Tanya and Leo have had barely any connection, and on two occasions, both Tanya and Leo say, "Oh, she's nothing to him, right? She's nothing to me. I'm nothing to him. Who are you? Oh, I'm nobody, right?" There's no claim of a pre-existing relationship. Instead, they establish their relationship through the incident, right? It's like Ayesha creates her own rival in the film, where she just got rid of the native girl was in her way. I mean, that's the phrase that she uses in the book, like, she stands in my way. So she kills her, like, successfully kills her, instead of having this incredibly elaborate dance number, which then leads to not killing her, and I don't know what the plan was. I still am not really following that. Like, the super complicated plan that, what's his name, the core guy that you like, Chris? I forget his name. Bilali, yeah. When Bilali suggests the really super ornate plan, right, about how to execute her in the least efficient way possible, and then of course it ends up backfiring, and it's not only like what disrupts the whole ceremony, but what seems to also cement Leo and Tanya's relationship, right, as he has to rush to her rescue. But that was, as I say, I thought that was kind of a fascinating choice, that they had her established not as a kind of a pre-existing figure, right? Like, you have this earlier relationship of his, and he's like, do I go with this like comparatively normal relationship with a comparatively normal woman who's sort of kind of from my culture, almost not really. I don't know what on earth she's from or why she's there in the tent of that other dude in the middle of the Arctic. Not quite sure on Tanya's background, have to admit. I was a little fuzzy on that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a suggestion that he's not even really her father?
That's the impression I got. Yeah. Like he just goes to an orphanage one day or something, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm her dad. And
which one of these can cook? Yeah, I'm her dad.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting also that there was like no implication that there was anything like really sketchy going on. She was just his cook. Like, that's it. Like, I needed somebody to cook, and so I picked up a girl to cook. That was weird. But anyway, but that's not what we saw, right? What we did not see was Leo essentially, to really, really loosely characterize it, like the girlfriend from home, like the familiar girl, or like the strange, exotic, immortal woman over on the other side. But that isn't how it played out, right? It was almost that, but not quite that. I mean, even her costume, right? When she dresses in the core outfit, right? She starts off with this like, I don't even know what this is exactly. The outfit that she's in, this sort of fairly plain conservative dress that she's in here at the beginning, looking like the only English housewife in the land of people dressed in exotic veils and crowns and things. And then but then she wears that. I was surprised that she changed her costume, that they insisted, but Chris, it was Bilali's fault. He gave it to her, right?
That's true. He wanted it to happen.
He wanted her to dress like that because he, I think, was trying to set her up as a rival. Like, he was hoping that Leo would fall in love with her and run off, and that he could then console Ayesha after he had, at least that's the sense that I got. The whole thing. You're right. Bilali was scheming the whole time, right? He was trying to make it happen. And then he wins, but then catastrophically fails, right? And we see him just collapsing in sadness at the end as she dies, right? But of course, to me, the most talk about what was Graham Greene's quote about wearing its symbolism heavily, right? Talk about heavy symbolism. Oh my goodness, the visual fade from the fire of life in the cave to the hearth fire at home.
Oh yeah.
In that final sequence, right? I was like, oh boy, all right, okay. And then Tanya spells it out, right?
Yeah.
Like, right. I think the only fire of life that we really need is our safe, secure hearth at home and the warmth of our love for each other. And I was like, okay, so like, it was kind of barf worthy at the end, but okay, I mean, I got it, but I don't know. Yeah, there's no place like home, says Arthur. Exactly.
Even visually, because when he's with she's in the throne and he's sitting down by her feet. Yeah. And then when they get to England, he's up in the easy chair and she's sitting down by his feet. And it's, the proper order.
Exactly. The world is restored to its to normal, right? Yeah.
Sharon's suggesting or asking, I guess, does Tanya function like Sam to help draw Frodo/Leo out from the evil power that has usurped his mind?
Ooh, good one, Sharon.
Down even to the rabbit stew, as Sharon points out. Yeah. That's not a connection I would have made, but there it is, right? So
is that a connection, from the book? I mean, clearly, what Ustani, is that the woman in the book? She's a rival, but does she give the same sense of being representative of these sort of opposing sets of values that Tanya gives? Or do you think that's something that sort of adapted when they changed the time period?
She cares for Leo when he's ill. I think she cooks for them. I think she mends their ripped clothing. I think you've got your finger on that.
Yeah, she definitely, like, she wins Leo's heart in the book by like her devoted service. Like, because I mean, the whole wedding thing is weird, right? The way they get married apparently is like the woman comes up, and so it's all initiated by the women. In fact, the whole society is largely matriarchal, which is an interesting angle in the book. That is the cannibal society, the natives, the savages, anyway, so the woman comes up and kisses you, and if you kiss her back, then you're married, right? So that's her proposing, and Leo does this without knowing what's going on, right? It's like she comes up, it's like literally they arrive in the camp of the natives. They've been there 5 minutes, and she looks at him, and he's hot. Like, Leo is like super, he's like Greek god. He's like the reincarnation of Apollo himself. So she comes up to Leo and is like, you're hot, and she kisses him. And so he's like, no idea what's going on, right? He's like, native
Okay.
culture. I'm just going to kiss her back, right? And then later on, people tell him, oh, yeah, so you're married now, by the way. Like, you didn't realize it, but now you're married.
Isn't that a
Basically, the
Firefly
plot to
episode?
our Mrs. Reynolds.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Were
All we got was
have
this
we
stick.
read Haggard? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot like that, except there's actually much more ritual. At least see, like, Mal and our Mrs. Reynolds, at least, like, there's a sense of ritual about that whole thing, right? Like, he's
Sure.
kind of too dense and too drunk to notice it, but
Mhm.
there's clearly ritual going on there. Whereas the other one, like in the book, it's everyone thinks it's just a greeting ritual, right? No one has any clue that this was matrimony that was going on here, right? But again, as Chris was saying, the sort of the journey from, okay, I find myself married to a native woman and I don't even know who she is or why, to his like genuine affection and attachment to her comes from like the obvious devotion of her service to him. You know, she's really attached to him and looks out for him and protects him and tends him when he's sick and all these other things. So that of course was picked up on in the film, in the scene here in the bottom center, right,
Mhm.
where she's like sneaking out and transgressively, going into the inner sanctum in order to check up on him because he's sick, right? So we do see that element there, but I think there's another way in which the wife element is handled very differently in the book, and again, that's because like she's already strange. Like Leo's connection to his native wife is already way outside boundaries, right?
Right.
So there is not, although her love for him is a very kind of housewifely sort of love, and very much in contrast to the awesome otherness of Ayesha. It's not exactly home versus
Right. She's
alien.
still kind of other. Not
Yeah, very
there's a
other.
difference. Yeah, there's a difference in degree, but she's not representative of those sort of homely English values necessarily.
Right.
And Tanya could have a Russian accent. She was raised by Russian nuns, but she's as British as you can get.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Down to the
Yes.
house dress. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of the things I kind of struggled with, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't shocked that we brought it back around to like, the home hearth fire is really, preferable to, like, we have chosen this and instead of, the awesome fires of immortality that we were sort of seeking from the beginning. And by the way, that was another massive change. Holly is the skeptic all through the book, right? He's the one who from the beginning is like, I don't buy any of this, like all this is nonsense. It can't possibly be true. And so that was probably to me the second most shocking moment in the film, like where I was just kind of reeling back and trying to parse things, was when Holly and Mr. Vinci Sr., who dies, right, were coming in at the beginning, and they're like, okay, so we know, we've proven scientifically that all of these things are true and it must happen. And I'm like, really? Okay. So that puts things on a different footing there. But it made, therefore, I think, more significant the choice at the end to turn aside and come back. Oh, and by the way, another really interesting conceptual difference. If Leo had chosen immortality and life with Ayesha in the film, that would have meant him becoming a kind of fossil too, right? Like living there in the tomb, shut away from the world, there in the Arctic, and he'd have her and she's great. And the two of them would have been together, but it just would have been them and the people of Kor and the cannibalistic Neanderthal hot potters and, not much else to do, right? I mean, it was really like, choose this. Tanya's really emphasizing this, right? Like, what can I offer you? She's offering you immortality, right? Well, I can't one up that, but all I can offer you is a life together. And, she's depicting these like domestic pleasures of, the two of us growing old together and experiencing happy things and sad things. But so it's really the choice between the two lives. Whereas in the book, in the book, there's the similar, like once she's like, Ayesha is proposing like, okay, so Leo, you're gonna, or Callicrates as she always calls him, Callicrates, you're gonna go through the fire and we're both gonna be immortal. And what's gonna happen next, of course, is global domination, right? We're gonna go out and we're gonna take over the world. In fact, the scene I could not help remembering throughout that section was the discomfort of Polly and Diggory and the magician's nephew when they're talking to Jadis, when she's like, you know, when they're like, oh, our world, it's not really worth visiting, and she's like, it will be worth visiting when I rule it, right? And you know, they're like, that won't be allowed, you know. I mean, they're kind of, as they're sort of like trying to get their heads around like this sorcerer queen who's going to come and take over the world, and that would be deeply uncomfortable, and let's try to hope that this doesn't happen. Holly does the same thing when Ayesha is like, yes, with my almost infinite wisdom and knowledge and power and my irresistible beauty, I shall come, and with Callicrates by my side, and his wisdom and knowledge shall surpass everything else, and the two of us shall rule the entire world together side by side. She's totally planning to move to England and take over in a very Jadis-like way. And it doesn't come to it. Like, they don't, unlike Jadis, she doesn't get to England. So, you know, we don't actually see that happening. But anyway, that's definitely I was interested that they, in a sense, kind of simplified that, right? In the book, that seemed to have the effect for Haggard of basically sort of showing, I don't know, it was a pretty clear indicator, like, okay, Leo, that's the wrong choice, right? If you know, don't choose global domination. That's probably not where, you know, I mean, it's one of the places where she's like most completely crazy, because she's pretty bad in the book. Like, she's got some deep problems. Ayesha's character does. Whereas again, here it's like, stay here alone with me or choose the world. It's a less morally charged choice that Leo is making there. And of course, then it, you know, it leads up to that final choice, that final juxtaposition with the hearth fire. So
yeah, and in addition to Galadriel, I know a lot of people have made connections between she and Jadis in other ways as well, an influence on C.S. Lewis. I guess, strangely, almost strengthened by the move to the Arctic. Like, now she's become this sort of ice queen, which only makes her a bit more, you know,
more Jadis-like,
yeah. And Sharon points out that we haven't really discussed it much, you know, comparing the film to the original book, but of course there are elements that are pulled in from all the books in this series. Apparently, I've only ever read She. I've not read the sequels, so
I haven't either.
I couldn't comment specifically on that. But just pointing out that maybe you know, that move. Well, there's the cat. I think you mentioned Tibet before, right? Like, one of the books takes place in Tibet, but it's not quite the Arctic. But you know, it's high mountain, cold and snowy.
Old mountain.
Same thing, pretty much, right?
Asia's not big, right? Like, it's kind of all the same.
That's pretty compact.
Like the size of Delaware, right?
Right.
I'm actually listening to it now on audiobook, and Ayesha, The Return of She, and talk about authorial retconning. He really retcons the whole relationship between Leo and Callicrates and first wife and Ayesha. He changes all their personalities. It's really bizarre. So that's for another discussion. Did anybody notice that Horace Holly was Dr. Watson?
No, I didn't.
No.
Nigel Bruce.
I did not.
There you go.
Well, we're kind of up in the last few minutes here. I don't know. I don't want to cut anyone off if you have any final thoughts, but maybe we should go into the drawings or
yeah. Let's do drawings. Okay. All right, so let me do. I gotta do some navigating in Windows here. Okay. Okay. Excellent. All right. Now, of course, as always, I do my drawings with the roll of multi-sided dice. That's my own personal tradition here. So let's see. Okay. And the winner of our donor drawing is Jennifer Ham. Congratulations, Jennifer Ham. All right. And then our attendee drawing. Okay, let's see. Where was my other thing there? Okay, all right. Attendee drawing. And let's see. And the winner is not, okay, Mubot doesn't count. So let's see.
Mubot.
There was a drawing earlier when I actually rolled Mubot. And I'm like, no, that's not gonna work. Okay. Okay. Let's see. So the winner is Crystal Aowen. Crystal Aowen is the winner. Congratulations. Congratulations, Crystal. You are the winner. So those two people, Jennifer and Crystal, should send an email to donate@signumu.org, and we will connect you with your prize.
Cool.
Excellent.
Congrats.
Well, thank you all to all our panelists, and of course to all of our attendees tonight. Great conversation and comments, as always, from the audience, even the ones we didn't read out loud necessarily. Don't forget the webathon on Saturday, and of course all of our other events that are coming up at Signum and Mythgard. And we look forward to seeing you back on November 15th for the movie club for Night of the Living Dead. So thanks, everyone.
Very good. Yes. Oh, and Takako was asking if we have film this week. We do have film this week.
That's right.
Yes, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we are going to start our discussion of season 4 of the Film Project. Yep.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Great.
On the subject of announcements that just came in here. But see, here's like interrupted you right in your sign off there, which was not good. Trying to
It's
catch
all good.
you.
It's been a while for film, so, and it's a new season, so
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of excitement about that. Great. Okay, well, we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.